Good morning, friends. Welcome to OBE Journal number 6. Continuing on, as always. And just, 5:15, about half an hour ago, I felt myself hovering over the Greater Toronto area, the GTA, feeling the vibrations of the city coming alive. Not that it's ever completely dead, of course, but it's very quiet at 4 in the morning. And feeling the presence of the souls, many, many souls returning to their bodies and preparing to launch themselves into another day of existence, another day of physical existence. And not quite as, actually quite quieter than the noise the birds make prior to doing much the same thing. But if you attune yourself to the vibration and the slight tinge of dawn that's coming into the sky, not much, it's still pretty dark, there is a definite sense of excitement and renewal. And you're outside of it because you're already, you feel yourself outside of it. You're not so conscious of yourself as making a new start because you've been out of body, you are out of body, you're active, and you're perceiving others who, of course, are, very much like you, part of your, I was going to say part of your DNA, part of your spiritual DNA, perhaps. And just stepping aside and observing is quite an elevated adventure in terms of vibration and sense of not quite mission exactly, that's a little too focused, a sense of presence, a sense of meaningful, purposeful, like excuse me, I haven't had a coffee yet, purposefulness, and an innate understanding of the cycle of activity and rest, and that goes beyond, that sense of frustrated meaninglessness that many people feel in their daily work, I guess, if their work is menial and they feel themselves above it. And certainly students do too, young people who feel the education isn't, feeding their real needs, something a lot of us go through when we're teenagers. And, one can easily fall into that trap that life does not have any kind of serious meaning. And if you absorb the many of the teachings of either science, I wouldn't say religion in particular. Religion does give a sense of purpose, even though people aren't convinced by it. Many people anyway. The sort of teachings of our medico-scientific brethren and the so-called professionalism of the corporate world, which preaches a very narrow, agenda, and leaves many people feeling cold. Such a meditation, such an out-of-body experience can blow all that away. Although if you're going out of body, you probably that's already blown out away, because you've broken through the barriers that hold you in, and bringing out of body experience to consciousness, because we all do it, and then forget it, or many people forget it, really helps with this. So I certainly recommend that type of meditation if you can do it. Even if you feel that you can't get out of body, getting up at dawn and meditating at dawn has a very similar function. Because in the meditation, part of you, your consciousness will go out, maybe a very small part, and you will say, oh, that's my imagination. Well, stop putting labels on it. It's part of you. And you will experience something similar. So prior to that, I was with a number of people who were, a number of spirits who were getting ready to return to the body because they sensed rather than knew that their little nighttime adventure was almost up. And I was on top of the CN Tower. I was in various places. And perhaps you would like the physical locations. Well, I was, for a little while, I was down by Niagara Falls, watching the falls as people watch the falls. And there's always spirits down there enjoying the vibration. And the excitement, shall we say, the excited vibration, in much the same way as you would in a physical body, but it's more intense and in spirit. And people congregate all over the place, spirits. And I know from past times that they do congregate there. And they're from all over, not necessarily from the GTA. Some are, some aren't. Some are from Buffalo, some are from various places in New York State. Some are from slightly farther afield, and you'll certainly get visitors from elsewhere on the planet because it's a well-known spot, and as other waterfalls. And once people get reasonably good at traveling, and when I say reasonably good, there's this notion of step 1, getting out of the body, step 2, getting out of your bedroom, step 3, getting out of the building in which you live, whether it's a house or an apartment, step 3, graduating from interest in your neighborhood, which when you're first out of body consciously is pretty interesting. And then, out of your neighborhood, out of your city, there's always these adopted barriers, unconsciously adopted sort of limitations. And, the next one is, well, I can't really get out of my country, can I? And can I really fly over the sea? All that sort of a thing. And the sort of semi-resort town of Banff in the Rocky Mountains in Alberta, Canada, is another gathering place. Again, because it's well known. There's been hotels there for years and decades. And it's very impressive, close to the mountains, and the energy of the mountains is perhaps not definable, but extremely exhilarating. And you'll find people there. And so there's all these sort of things, can I get out of my neighborhood into this? Can I explore the city by myself? Can I explore the province? Can I explore the state? Can I get across the ocean? Can I go to Paris? Can I go to St. Petersburg? And Banff's another place that a lot of people think about. For Americans, it's more, Aspen, Denver. But that thrill of the mountains is definitely there. And so a series of, limitations that you have to just sort of toss out, And another early one is, many early adopters will have the fear of, am I going to die when I'm away from the body? And of course you're not, but they worry about it. And you have to sort of help them out on that. They ask questions online. So anyway, down at Niagara Falls, just hanging out with some people getting ready to, and some people are just, they're just there, hanging out, enjoying the scene. They don't necessarily want to talk. They might be, I've said hello to a couple of other people. Just because I'm there doesn't mean they suddenly want to come up and talk. And I don't interfere. In the same way you're standing next to people looking, at the falls and enjoying it. You wouldn't necessarily, you might talk to people, you might not. You suss out how friendly they wish to be or how private they wish to be, and you proceed onward on that perception. And it's the same out of body. And as I've said in other vids, you can suss out if they wish to learn more, if they're fairly new, or they're satisfied with what they know, in terms of what can be done and what can't be done out of body. And I just kind of nose around and feel out who might need a question answered. And there was a couple last night, a couple of hours ago, and let me just focus on what those questions were. Young Asian lady. I can't be any more focused than that. I hope nobody's offended. And when I say Asian, we've got many Asian people living in this part of Canada. So that doesn't mean she flew over from China or whatever. It's just a descriptor, And she seemed excited and enthused, and we chatted about the beauty of it all and the wonder of it all. And she actually said to me at some point, you're dreaming, don't you? And I said, yes. I said, it's a very, very special kind of dream, though, isn't it? And she said, what do you, what do you mean by that? And I said something along the lines of, when you're out flying, it's a flying dream, right? And she nodded enthusiastically. And I said, I just feel that flying dreams are kind of special, and that when I started flying, I looked down at my body asleep and I thought, oh yeah, there I am asleep. And then I started flying. And I didn't need to put in that detail, but I wanted to see how she'd react to it. And I think she had actually done that. Or she looked slightly puzzled and then sort of, oh yeah, sure. And I wasn't sure if it was kind of, she didn't want to be one-upped, or she'd done it so briefly she'd forgotten it. Because not everybody does that. People get out of the body and get excited and don't look back at the body. And, I mean, some do, some don't. But there was that. And so we talked a bit about flying dreams and how special they are. And she said, oh, I just love them. They're marvelous or wonderful, something like that. And I said, I especially love whizzing through clouds and coming out the other side. And she said she hadn't done that, but it sounded like a lot of fun and she'd try it sometime. And I got the feeling she didn't really go up in the sky, maybe just kept 100 or so feet up. But, you'd have to be more, if you're flying through the city, you'd have to be a little higher than that. Although there's all that, if you get a bit of a daredevil in big cities, you can sort of whiz through the skyscrapers. That's fun. And I wasn't sure if she'd done that. I didn't bring it up. I thought about it, but I was proceeding on the cloud scenario. So we chatted a bit more. I asked if she had friends that liked to do this sort of thing, and did they do it together? And she said, "Oh no, our friends don't seem to know about it or do it, or and she's too shy to break." She says, "I never talk about it." She said, "You don't want to seem weird, do you?" And I said, "Well, yeah, that's a consideration, especially if you've got the kind of job where people sort of looked up to you and respect you and that sort of thing." And she sort of nodded as though she did have that kind of a job, although I didn't, ask. But I saw an image in my mind's eye of a young woman, 26, 27, very sort of dressed in a business fashion and interviewing people. Or maybe not interviewing, talking to people behind a desk. Maybe she worked in a bank, maybe she was a loans officer. I'm just not quite sure. That doesn't really matter, but there was a front of intelligence and decorum and good behavior to be kept up by this woman. And talking about going out of body on coffee break was perhaps not the smartest idea. And I'm not even sure how much she would remember of it, because when people are out there talking about it, they're enthusiastic and into it, and and curious, etc., etc. But that doesn't mean they remember that. You don't know how much they're going to remember the next morning. They might not, and they might remember dribs and drabs, and you know. So had that conversation, and she asked me if I had people that I could share with, and I said, oh yeah, and I said it's nice to be able to do that, to share one's experience and one's enthusiasms, and she said yes, it was, and she'd like to do more of that, but couldn't quite see a way how, and and I said something like, well, perhaps we'll meet up again, and I can, introduce you to some other people that I know. And she sort of looked a little, a little querulous, a little sort of, well, yeah, that might be a good idea. But then she's thinking, strange man, looks like a nice fellow, but I better be careful. And so I didn't push the envelope on that one, and said I was heading off, and that I come to the falls fairly often, and I look forward to running into her again. And I said goodbye, and she smiled, and off I went. And where did I go to next? Castle Loma. There's a museum type mansion in Toronto called Castle Loma that's open to the public some days a week, and I've noticed in the past, and going right back to more adventures in eternity, that there's always people hanging out there. There's always ghosts and spirits that are real dead people there, and that are spirits passing through just for the fun of it. And so I hopped over there, and yeah, more or less instantaneous transfer. Not quite. I was sort of whizzing, but real quick. And I just thought it'd be fun to see who would be there just before waking up time. And there was a few people walking around. People of modest means, who like to fantasize about living in a big house and feel that because that it's a museum, they wouldn't go into some private home and in the classier neighbours of Toronto. They're decent people. They're not going to be infiltrated in people's privacy. But with Castle Loma, they feel, well, it's open to the public. It's a museum. Nobody lives here. There's probably a night watchman, but so they don't feel that same sense of privacy, and they love to just go in and fantasize about living in a fancy home with servants and that sort of thing. And as well as that, you've got some dead people who are hanging out there. Dead people that don't know what to do, and the usual confused dead folk haven't moved on to the astral plane. They're ghosts, and they're doing much the same fantasy thing, and they're not really any trouble, but they don't feel like they own the place. They just like hanging out, and so I kind of amble around and see what I see, and there's a bit of two categories of people, spirits rather, and quite a few of them, and they've got a slightly different. The ghosts are sort of duller, and people that are out of body are a little brighter, basically, like a sort of a more, not sparkly, more kind of shining haze around them. The dead ones are a little duller. They've got that little aura of haze around them, but it's duller, and you get so you can pick them out pretty fast. And so I chatted. Sort of people are wandering around, sort of behaving themselves generally, as they would if they'd paid their admission and were walking through in their physical bodies, and just enjoying the place. And I think there's some first timers there. People have been out of body a few times and think, people from the GTA, because it's well known around here. I don't know how well known it would be elsewhere, but it is here. And we would say, oh, let's go to, like, now that we're out of body, let's go to Castle Loma. Or they would say that to themselves. And they just wander around. Just another place to have a look at. And as I say, they're behaving themselves, walking around, looking at stuff, smiling, and you know, sort of feeling like, "Ooh, am I doing the right thing here? I better behave myself." And so this is a general quiet social vibe about the place. Now I'm looking for anyone that might have something interesting to say or a question or the usual sort of discreet guide routine. A lot of us do that just as a service, really, and um, and it's very similar to somebody might walk up to you in a place like that, in a physical place, and say, "Do you know where the washroom is?" And you'd say, "Oh yeah, it's right back there, going on the left, and ladies over that way." And so you get more of those out of body questions. And if you're standing or sitting on a nice piece of furniture or admiring something, and somebody comes up to you and admires, they'll chat on, and you'll sense that they might have a question here. And last a couple of hours ago, there was a couple of questioners. I just give you them as examples. Um, Let me see. An older lady, as opposed to the young Asian lady that I met, an older Caucasian lady, obviously out of her body and maybe not quite sure, uh, but certainly enjoying and sort of enthused to me about how what a lovely place this was and how great it was to be able to just kind of come in and visit. And I agreed. I said, yes, it's a beautiful home. Wouldn't one love to live in a place like this, sort of. And then, of course, given the popular culture and what it is, there was a definite sense of, we're going to talk about Downton Abbey any second. And, I thought, well, I'll just start, And a great show. I really enjoyed it and would watch it again anytime. And so we did a little bit of Downton Abbey stuff and talked about our various insights. And of course, she was a Matthew fan and was disappointed right after, Matthew had exited the series. And I said, well, I enjoyed him and, the usual sort of stuff. And, I said I was really interested in Edith's path in life and also the butler. And, you know, so just a sort of point of when you're out of body, popular culture still plays a huge role in what people think and say. And there's certainly lots of people will want to talk about major league sports, for example, in politics, as I indicated a while. So we share that popular culture thing, and that goes on. And in the afterlife, which we'll be talking about more in more detail eventually, rather than just quick trips around out of body. Um, that lasts for a long while, and it fades, either quickly or slowly, depending on a person's attachment. All about attachment. So, but anyway, so she was just keen to be chatting, and I got the sense that the husband had passed. She looked to be about 70. I'm not quite sure, and that she was slightly lonely. Had friends and family, but living alone. And as I've talked about in other retrievals, in my books and blog, uh, you can pick up the subconscious thoughts of people when you're standing next to them. Whether they're even conscious of them or not is hardly matters. And the thoughts, the feelings, different scenarios. And I asked not some leading questions, but I kind of led around to that, and I said something about my girlfriend would like to come here, but she doesn't come out of body as much as I do, and I don't like to disturb her sleep, and and I kind of inched that around to some years ago, living alone for many years and being a bachelor and adjusting to being part of a couple, and I thought maybe I could nudge her into, and it was successful on that level, and where were we? so she did start talking about missing her dear Alec. I think it was Alec, and she said we had, a good long relationship, and her children were her great joy in life, growing up, and um, the grandchildren too. That was sort of mentioned briefly, and but she did miss her dear and looked forward to seeing him again one day, although she didn't know how or where. And and I said, "Oh, do you not think he'd be in the afterlife when you get there?" And she said, "Oh, he was disgruntled with religion and had taken to I don't. She didn't call it, humanism, but that's what she meant. Living a good life, living morally, living like a decent human being was its own reward, and a good argument indeed. But I sensed that she really did want to meet him, and she believed in the afterlife, but he didn't. And I said, well, you're out of body now. We could, you could go meet him. And she looked at me like I was a bit mad, and I think she had this perception that, yeah, you could be out of body when you're asleep, but that doesn't mean you can go, you can go really far away. And I sort of said, well, the afterlife isn't really that far away. I've gone there many times, and there's lots of, I laughed and said, there's lots of dead people there, and so she looked intrigued, and she said, after a minute or two, could I show her how to get there? And I said, yeah, sure. If you're interested, I'll show you. And she said, well, and she turned away and looked at, some furniture or whatever, and thought about it for a minute. And some other people were standing beside us, but they weren't really participating, and they walked away. And at least I think they walked. I wasn't really paying that much attention. I was waiting for her answer. And she sort of spoke up after a minute, and she said, that's really kind of you to offer. Can I think it over and get back, come meet you here again another time? And I said, sure, that's fine by me. I said, I drop by here every once in a while. And I didn't quite say it looking for, confused ghosts. I didn't want to trouble her. She probably hadn't seen them yet, or had noticed that there were ghosts, because, people, newbies don't know the finer distinctions. And they pick them up along the way. But let me see. So, we made a sort of semi-arrangement, and I said, oh, I'm sure we'll run into you again sometime, and I knew I would. And, I said, for now, enjoy your flying dreams. Or did I say flying dreams? No, I didn't. I said that to the other lady. I said sort of, enjoy your time away from your sleeping body. And I don't think she quite considered it in those terms. But, I left her with that thought and moved on, and said goodbye. And I walked around other parts of the house looking for ghosts, and I did see a couple, but they were very closed off, in terms of not really needing or wanting to communicate. You might say shy. They were reacting to a belief system. They probably thought I couldn't see them. And that's often the case. They think, oh, no, they can't see me. I'm not really here. Nobody can see me. Like a kid hiding in the closet, And so I didn't see any possibility of progression or advancement with these a couple of ghosts that I saw. And I thought, well, they'll hang out. They fall asleep. They sit in a corner and don't bother anybody. But they like being there, and it's better than sitting out as a ghost on the sidewalk, which many people do. And people confuse the confused dead, the dead in denial, of other realities, ignorance. They will often be attracted to institutional type buildings that they were fond of in life. And as I said in my first couple of books, you'll always find people at sports events, and the various places in Toronto where they play, hockey, baseball, and we have a basketball team now. When I started doing out of body, we didn't have a basketball team. We got one now, and they're comfortable there, and they love the idea of having a great seat for every game, if they're big fans. Seats that might have cost a lot of money when they were alive, especially hockey. And they'll just hang out, and then when the game's there, they'll sort of more come alive, and physical people will sit right on them, but there's a sense of they can share. They're on a different vibration, so you can sort of sit on them, and they'll be slightly hurt, but they won't be pressured or hurt or anything. Their personal space has been invaded, but they're on a different vibration. They don't sense it that much. Anyway, they love the energy of the crowd and the excitement of the game, and it thrills them. I mean, the same way that it thrills you when you're there in physical body, but when you're in the astral body, it thrills you much, much more, and it's just terribly exciting. And they just love it, and they just hang out between games, and you'll find quite a few of them there, and they don't want to know. They're like, no, we're fine, thanks, see ya. And I tour through there every once in a while, see what I can see, do what I can do. Same with big churches. People that have gone to big, impressive old churches, architecturally impressive, I mean, and they're old, so they've accumulated a lot of the vibrations of devotion and love and aspiration, and they feel they can provide a womb-like atmosphere to nurture the confused spirit, and in that way they serve greatly. Now people can get addicted to it and never leave, and that's what people like me do. We sort of sense the ones that have been hanging around a while, see if we can get them to move on to a heaven world that's suitable to their needs. And you might wonder, well, if they're in a church and they're religious and they have strong belief system, why wouldn't they just go anyway? Well, religious people often have a great sense of guilt and self-punishment and self-judgment. They weren't the Christian or the religious, whatever denomination you wish to say. They didn't live up to the teachings. They were sinners. They don't deserve. There's a lot of not deserving stuff going on, and self-criticism, undeserving, the self-imposed purgatory. Instead of the Catholics going to a purgatory, they impose themselves one right on there, and they might have been, servile to their lower nature, jealous, angry, competitive in a ruthless way. I mean, our society encourages competitiveness to bring out the bestness, supposedly, but the dark side encourages ruthlessness and cruelty and selfishness, and we've all seen it. And some of us have done it. And when they die, there's a lot of that self-recrimination, and I was sinful, I was mean, and I don't deserve. They will not forgive themselves because they don't know how. And so that keeps religious people hanging around. And the more severe cases never get out of the graveyard. And I've spoken about that on other occasions. Spirits waiting in graveyards near their rotting physical bodies, waiting for Judgment Day. Sleeping in Jesus until Judgment Day, all that sort of a thing. So the ones that hang out in churches are maybe a step past that. At least they're not attached to the decaying physical body. And so, sports places, churches, Castle Loma, museums, the Art Gallery of Ontario, the various places in Toronto, the various museums, the Gardner. You float through them, you'll occasionally find people there. And sometimes they're just there for the sheer pleasure of going. They've gone a lot. And when you're looking at the paintings in the AGO in your astral body, you're seeing an astral version of that painting. It's a duplicate, and it's exact and everything, but it kind of shines more and you can go into it. The colors vibrate more intensely. And for those of you who've taken psychedelics or mushrooms, it's kind of like that. You don't have to be taking anything, but a lot of you know psychedelics and mushrooms raise your vibration to that astral level to some degree. So anyway, you'll find people there, but they can often be very self-fulfilled and happy just to be hanging out in an art gallery with wonderful art, just as one is as an art lover on earth. So there's a couple of conversations for you, sort of things that can happen, and if they happen to you, I hope you enjoy the challenge of handling them. It's just another thing to learn as one explores and deals with life on many levels and spirits in many conditions. And I think that's it for this evening, or this morning. As you can see, the dawn is rapidly pushing its way through the window here. And I wish you all a fond farewell.